Okay, Philippe, we are in Cahors,
Oui.
where the Malbec grape really originated.
That's right, yeah.
So it's not Argentina, it's right here in France.
No, Argentina is our cousins, and Malbec went to Argentina about 150 years ago, but it came from France.
Now tell me a little bit about this region of Cahors, because I think there's a lot of history behind it.
We are not very far from Bordeaux, but Bordeaux is by the sea, and for centuries had access to that harbor, access to the sea, and so selling Cahors wines meant to go through Bordeaux.
An easy way to transport the wine.
Yeah, well,
Right.
in that time it was key to go through boats, no
Yeah.
planes, and so
Yes.
it has to go to Bordeaux. And the vines were introduced in Cahors with the Romans coming from Italy 2,000 years ago. And Romans loved drinking, and so they planted vines. And since then, vines have been growing here in Cahors.
I know France is very regimented on the regions
Yes.
and the defined boundaries, and you're in the appellation of Cahors.
Yes.
What does that really mean, and what rules do you have to live by?
Appellation is very complex. It took me a few years to really understand it. So to make it simple, appellation is also sometimes written as AOC. And what's important for you to remember is the O in the AOC means origin. So that's really the key thing about the AOC. It means the wine comes from grapes from a geographic area. So the AOC is really to prove that the grape and the wine comes from a special location. But there is a price to pay. Because you belong to the AOC, you need to follow a lot of rules. So it's not just having a vineyard, but you have a maximum yield allowed. You cannot water the vines. You have a lot of process, a lot of restrictions. So there are so many rules that at the end, it's good and bad. What's good is that you have some authentic wine, but nowadays with the worldwide competition, it makes it difficult to adapt.
Now these grapes are actually growing on one type of terroir, but you are lucky because on the other side of this slope, on this hill, you have another type of terroir.
That's the beauty about wine, not just Malbec, but wine in general, is that the wine is an expression of where it comes from. And so when you have different plots, you have different expressions. And you could decide to bottle each expression, and then you have hundreds or thousands of different wine styles, and that's not the goal. So at the end, you decide which of the styles your vineyard is offering you want to express. And that's where blending comes into the picture. And the soil is very important. Here we have some clay, we can see the clay, and we have limestone, but there is no iron, while on the other side we have iron. And this will give different wine styles. And so depending of the vintage, because in France the vintage is very important, we may decide to blend differently. So every year is a different recipe.
Sounds good. I want to go up to the castle
Okay,
and have a
let's
drink.
test wine. Let's go.
This is the infamous Chateau de Chambert.
That's correct. So this wine is a blend. So it's a blend of plots. With this blend, the goal is to have the power of Malbec, but there is also a little bit of Merlot in it. And Merlot brings additional silkiness and also allows to drink the wine sooner, while Malbec can age a lot more. So a good compromise.
All right,
You want to pour?
pour. S'il vous plaît. Yeah, you can definitely smell the black cherries and plums.
You can smell it's very fresh, the freshness.
Spicy.
It's a spiciness, so that's the Malbec is spicy. And also you can smell a little bit of wood, but it's very subtle, a very little bit. And so all this mix makes it very complex.
Now, if someone had never tried Malbec before, then what other varietal would you say this is similar to?
I think whoever has tried powerful and elegant, so you can have a Cabernet Sauvignon or Shiraz, are powerful grapes, then they should definitely try Malbec. It's different, but it shares this power, but still elegant. So it's very refined grape to try.
When I think of the spice in this wine, it makes me think of spicy food. So is it fair to say that this would be a good pairing with something spicy?
Food is always challenging with the wine. There are some dishes that do not go well with wines, or you have to pick the right wines. And for Malbec, any red meat and any dish that is spicy works well. So it could even be chicken. You would say chicken is not red meat, yes, but if you add spices to the chicken, chilies or whatever, or Indian food, it was very well with Malbec.
Well, let's give it a try.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Tell me a little bit about the terraces, what they have in common, and maybe what's a little bit different about each one.
In the Cahors region, we have 4 terraces. The first terrace is the floodplain really beside the river. There, the grapes give a very high production, but of a low quality wine. We have no vines on that level at all. We start on the second terrace, where it's much more sandy, well drained, so we've got a lot of nutrients there, and that gives a wine more fruity wine. Then when we come to the third terrace, we start finding red clay, purple clay, so that shows that there's a certain mineral presence, notably iron ore. So we have on the third terrace much more complex tannins. When we move to the fourth, we're really on the coasts, the rocks. Here we have big iron ore deposits, so we get a more rounded, velvety taste from the grapes. The tannins are much more luxurious.
There's actually quite an extensive competitive history here, is there not?
Yes. The Cahors is one of the oldest winemaking regions in France, and in the 1st century AD, the Emperor Diocletian ordered that all the grapes in this region should be pulled out and replanted with grain because there was a famine. Really, it was because the Roman winemakers were jealous that the French were making better wine.
Right, okay. So he's trying to eliminate his competition, take away your tools, basically.
Yes.
Now, you have actually created a wine, or at least Jean-Luc Baldas has created a wine that is based on that story, right?
Yes. In 1976, Jean-Luc's father released the first Grand Cru in the area. And he named it after Prince Probus, who was the Roman emperor that ordered the replanting of vines in this region.
And that Probus wine is a blend of this tier.
This tier and the third terrace and the second terrace. When we blend them together, we take the best from each. This terrace brings, as I said, the velvety tannins, and you add that to the complexity of the third terrace, which helps with the laying down of the wine.
Right.
And with the second terrace, you've got the fruitiness, so you end up with the blend of a perfect wine.
Right. It's the best of really the 3 terraces in one.
Terraces.
And you're actually harvesting today, right?
Yes,
Okay, I think we should go have a look and make sure they're working hard.
they should be.
Okay. Now, you decided this morning that you were actually going to pick this afternoon. So what's your decision-making process?
It's a complicated process based on the ripeness of the grape and the weather forecast. For the grape, we look at, first of all, the bloom, and then we taste it to see if there's the right acidity balance, sugar, and tannins. And then we have to look at the weather to see if we're going to have the right amount of sun or rain, and that can change everything.
Do you want to have a look at the bunch?
Okay, take a few right here.
Thank you. What's the first thing that you're looking for?
The bloom shows the ripeness, the blue dust, if you like.
Okay.
And then underneath you see the colour of the grape. It's nice deep colour.
Mm-hmm.
The skin is very clear.
So that it's a consistent, sort of rich color?
Yep. And then from that also you can tell the juice inside. Nice plump.
Mm-hmm.
And then we taste them.
The fun part?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And now what are you looking for?
On tasting them, you can get in the juice the sugar and the acidity balance.
Mm-hmm.
And you bite through the pips to see if the tannins are ready, not too green, not too astringent.
The pips being the seeds.
The seeds.
And they are actually not bitter, because
not
at other
bitter.
times of year they are. They're
Yeah,
quite green.
They're very green.
And what about the skin? Should it be crisp? Should it be soft?
It should be crisp. It should pop in your mouth,
Okay.
virtually, yes.
Okay. Now, what factors are you trying to keep in mind with the weather at this point in your harvest?
Well, really, we're looking for sunny weather. Rain at this point would be more difficult for us because we're at the point where we're looking for the optimum ripeness. A dryness for the picking, too much water is bad, and also can lead to problems with mildew and other sicknesses that can come from the damp weather.
And too much water can actually almost drown out the sugar?
Too much water when we're harvesting would then go into the fermentation. It would cause problems.
You've also decided that you're going to pick in the afternoon. What difference does that make as compared to early in the morning?
Early in the morning, in certain cases, there's a small cover of fog and therefore humidity.
Which is beautiful.
It's beautiful when we see it from high, but for picking for certain wines, you want to eliminate too much humidity.
If you were to pick earlier in the morning when it's colder, what would happen to the final blend?
What would happen is that there's certainly more moisture on the grapes. We end up with a kind of condensation, and that has knock-on effects on the fermentation.
Do you use machines? You hand harvest everything?
We hand harvest a certain part of the vineyard. For the probus, for the black wine, we hand pick, because that way we're able to ensure that we are picking the best grapes.
Now, you mentioned this black wine, which is something that is quite unique in the world,
Yes.
right? So tell me a little bit about that wine.
It comes from a Middle Age recipe, because in the 13th century the Cahors was exported to Britain. It was actually the wine for the marriage of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine.
Okay.
But to survive the sea voyage at that time, they had to fortify it. So in the Middle Ages, they used to take half the harvest and they'd heat it in a cauldron, and then they'd mix it together to bring out the sugars and slightly more alcohol.
And to keep it and to protect it from the travel.
And protect it from the travel. So Jean-Luc Valdez, he found the recipe and wanted to marry it with modern vinification methods to make, as a kind of homage to the past, but with definitely a modern taste to it.
Let's go have a taste.
Okay.
Grapes have been pressed, the Malbec grapes have been pressed initially once. How would you describe this wine to somebody in terms of flavors and aromas?
Aromas, we definitely find the plum, red fruits, blackcurrant, blackberry, very jammy aroma.
And a little bit of pepper. What would you eat with this?
My personal favourite is a bar of good chocolate. 75%.
Yeah. Oh, that's specific?
Yes.
Okay. But it smells like this is a wine that could really stand on its own as well.
Yes, it can stand on its own as a wine to be drunk. Toute seule.
Toute seule. Well, not that I'd complain about having a bar of chocolate either.
Okay.
Santé.
Santé.
Jean, you have quite a unique, maybe somewhat unique philosophy on how you use oak to age your wine.
Absolutely, because we are not thinking that oak makes good wines, but it helps. And we are looking at the complexity coming from the oak barrels that blend with the wine itself.
Okay. Now you have two different wines, the Chateau La Grisette and the Pigeonnier, that have been aged 18 months for one and 28 months for the other.
18 for the Chateau, 28 for the Pigeonnier, but the wines are different because the Pigeonnier is a lot more complex maybe than the Chateau, and it's a 100% Malbec. When Chateau La Grisette is at least 85% Malbec and some Merlot.
Okay, so with the Chateau La Grisette, 85% Malbec, 15% Merlot, roughly. You use the Merlot to soften the tannic elements.
The Malbec itself, and to give to that Malbec a little bit more complexity. Okay, now Pigeonnier is different, of course, because the yield is lower, so the wine stands by itself. Okay.
Okay, the yield is lower, meaning you have less grapes per vine. And you actually do something called a green harvest.
Green harvest, yes.
Where you intentionally cut away some of the early grapes, or the grapes
in
earlier
August.
in the season,
Yes.
to decrease the number of grapes per vine, because that actually creates a better grape.
Maybe it brings more complexity, as I was saying, to the grapes themselves. And good grapes make good wine anyway.
Right.
That's the,
right. It
the
all
philosophy
starts in the
behind.
vineyard. Yeah.
Yes, it starts in the vineyard,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Now, Jean, how would you describe the Chateau La Grisette, your first wine? How would you describe that taste?
It's strong because it's Malbec, quite complex, with a lot of small red fruits.
Okay.
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 But anyway, Chateau La Grisette and Pigeonnier have to be as elegant and refined as possible. This is our goal.
So there's lots of like red fruits, like small
red
black
fruits,
red
plums,
fruits, dark
plums,
fruits. Okay, plums.
dark small
maybe
fruits.
licorice.
Licorice,
some sort of
anise, vanilla coming from the barrels. The barrels are mainly bringing more complexity to the wine, and they help to soften the wine. There is some micro-oxygenation between the inside and the outside.
Okay, so the oxygen coming into the barrel helps soften the
Very
wine a little bit.
very
Because
slowly.
a lot of people would probably think that keeping it in oak for so long would make it taste a bit oakier, but in fact you're saying it's the opposite.
The oaky taste shouldn't cover the wine itself.
Right.
It should just bring some complexity to the wine. In no way should you taste the oak and not the wine.
Now I want to try this one because
Sure.
this is the Pigeonnier, and this
Is your
has
glass?
been merci.
This is Pigeonnier, 2009, excuse me.
And this has been in the barrel for about almost 12
Almost
months.
1 year. And it should spend maybe 16 or 18 more months. We shall see, because we taste quite often. So the more we taste, the more we know about the wine. Okay?
How would you describe this wine, which has been in here for 28, or will have been in here for 28 months? How does it compare to the La Grisette?
Very strong, very elegant, soft, a lot of potential, full body.
And what would you eat with it?
I would
What's
eat
your
some
favorite?
game or foie gras, hearty food,
Stews?
red
soups,
meats.
Red meats, okay. And earthy, like mushrooms and...
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yes. So this is the Pigeonnier, 1 year old.
I can
It's
definitely...
very strong.
I mean, obviously there are dark fruits and...
Dark fruit, yes. Since it's so young, you get the aromas coming from the Malbec. A few months from now, it will be different because there will be the whole blend between the winemaking process, the grapes, the fruits, and the oak aging.
Right. Okay.
Always think about the balance and the combination between all the different things.
Now, another question with oak, you've obviously got to, with the 28-month aging, you've obviously got to store the wine longer, you've got to buy new barrels. It's an expense to use.
Very expensive, but we are talking here about premium wines, top quality wines, of course.
And it's a bit of a risk, is it not?
Yes,
With this type of...
mainly, I would say mainly in the vineyards because the yield is very low. So anyway, if we would have a storm or anything of that kind, we could lose a lot, the whole production.
Risky business.
Risky business, but I think the results are quite good.
Okay.
Do you enjoy? Do you like it?
I will give it a try.
Okay.
I know it's only been in here for 12 months,
12
but it
months.
doesn't even, it's astringent. You can taste the tannins, but it is still smooth. And
Very
this is the one
smooth.
without the Merlot.
Without the Merlot.
Right, and-
There will not be any Merlot in these barrels, but remember, oak doesn't make good wines. It just helps to bring more complexity
Okay.
to the wine.
Good note. Merci. Santé.